Good evening, everyone. Adequate notice of this meeting was provided by sending such notice to the Asbury Park Press, the Middletown Patch, the Middletown Township Public School District website, and the posting of such notice at the August T. Minor Administrative Offices and each elementary, middle, and secondary school website in the district. Roll call.
Mrs. Caminiti. Mr. Donlin.
Here.
Mr. Dymo. Mr. Heffernan. Mr. Little.
Here.
Mrs. Tobacco. Mrs. Wright. Here. Mr. Capone. Here. Mrs. Williams.
Yeah. Okay, tonight's meeting is to discuss the ESSER funds, but we're going to start out with 30 minutes of public comment. I'll start with you first. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we're going to open up for public comments. Seeing none, I'd like to close the public comment session and start our discussion.
Okay. I'm gonna just hand out. Exactly where we can put the money. And Chris, you want to shoot up on my?
Sure.
Actually, I have. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, thanks. Yeah, this is, like, the grants, it's a big grant, but there's all different sections to this grant. So the first four columns that you see are the sub-grants. Those are separate grants that the New Jersey Department of Education received a big chunk of money from the federal government. And they were permitted to provide this money to schools. So they came up with these sub-grants, which they're called sub-grants, and provided the schools with specific amounts in each sub-grant. Every school, it's a lot of their amount. And there's specific criteria that you have to meet for the activities that go into these sub-grants, and we'll go over them in a little while. So those are the four sub-grants. Then there's the ESSER 3. That comes directly from the federal government. It didn't go through the state, it came right from the federal government. And in that grant, 20% of the money allocated to the school has to go to learning acceleration. The other 80% can go to learning acceleration, but it also can go to things like facilities. But everything has to be COVID related. Everything in all of these categories has to be somehow related to COVID. So last week we had a discussion about it. We had come up with a plan, and the board presented this plan that was actually created with input from our principals. What do they need? What do they see their needs as the school? Input from our directors, our district directors. So it wasn't just administration of the central office saying, this is what I think we need. This came from the bottom up, and we developed this plan. But we heard from the board that mental health, social emotional learning was more important. And you'd like us to go back and look and see where can we add to support our students in these areas of social emotional and mental health. So that's what we did. We looked at what we have to support our students right now. And one of the programs that we had, and we actually had it in the grant, but we had a much smaller allocation and obviously a much smaller program plan for ESS, Essential School Solutions. We were just looking at 2 counselors only at the elementary level to do counseling for students that were in need of more than what our counselors, would give them. Our guidance counselors do, and our SPSSs do work with our students, but they're not clinicians. So they'll work with the students to help them through certain problems or, how to manage a certain situation so that, they can achieve in the classroom. But when it comes to a certain point, they would have to refer out to whether it's an in-house, or white counselors or an out, district. Not what we pay for, what we say, we suggest you go to, a counselor. But ESS can provide those clinicians, and we're looking at a program that expands from K to 12. So we actually have ESS, they're going to, Michelle, are they gonna be ready? We're gonna have half hour open comment. And they're gonna explain what they are proposing for us. We worked with them over before we went away on break, and then again today, to develop a program that we really thought would provide the level of support for our students and also for our staff to help our students and our parents also. There's some parent support here too. So we'd like them to explain that to the board and to the community. So let's get them up there if we can, okay? Are they on yet?
They're not logged in yet.
Oh, they're not logged in yet? Oh, they're gonna log in.
This is Walker, while we're waiting for them to log in, I think we should also clarify that with the ESSER 3 funds, the original guidance that we were given
Yes.
was that there's always been a discussion about this 20% set aside, for the specific purposes. And the original guidance that we were given was that was incorporated to these sub-grants, which would be the 4 sub-grants with the smaller amounts, and that was, there wouldn't be any additional set aside of 20% over that. But in the last week or so, as we've been going back and forth with the county office, getting clarification on what would be allowable, what wouldn't be allowable, some other things we were talking about, they said they have received further detailed guidance that is indicating that now we have to set aside this 20% out of the ESSER 3 funds. So that's why this $4 million now we have to set aside approximately $800,000 and change for the learning acceleration that we were not originally guided to do. So that's also a change.
Oh, that's not a big change.
It is.
It is.
It is. We originally were planning to spend almost all that on our HVAC systems, and now instead of the $4+ million, we can only do 3.2. That's the maximum that we're at spend.
Where is that in writing? Because it just all of a sudden now pops up. I mean, we were gonna vote on it last week, we voted on it, we wouldn't even know that. So where is that in writing from the state that now has to happen when it didn't say before?
Well, I know that we had I don't know if there was an email, I walked in on a discussion that Mrs. Walker.
We were talking to somebody from the county office today, and then
I
clarified it.
I
From the DA.
Right.
Because Amy's like, no, that's not what they said. I said, I know that's not what they said. I said, but this is what they just said today.
There was
They said
always
they just had a big meeting and this is what
Right,
they're
there was always reference to this 20%, but originally we told 20%.
What was the, were those first 4 buckets?
Exactly, that's the, right, that was what we
That was the
discussed with
original
them
version.
weeks ago, but they said that they've gotten evolving guidance from the state and clarified.
Well, I think part of the problem is this ESSER 3, which you have to use the 20%, comes directly from the federal government. So I think they weren't getting the information correctly from the federal government to tell schools. They since got clarification from the federal government that the 20% cannot be what's in those first 4 buckets. It has to be 20% of that last column, and that is what is there.
So the first 4 are then separate grants?
Well, they're both
There's
sub-grants.
grants of our out.
Yeah, this whole thing is the American Rescue Plan, and the state provided the first 4 with money they got from the federal government. But then the federal government is directly administering the ESSER 3. And so the state, I think, just didn't have the right information about that 20% on that ESSER 3 part.
So does that mean that we were going to approve it
that another district who's already approved it might have to go back and change their.
Absolutely.
Well, if they submit once they submit their plan, if that wasn't done correctly, it would be sent back to the district to modify.
Okay, so what you're saying is these ESS clinicians are part of the learning acceleration?
Well, there's a portion of that that's going to be under the accelerated learning, coaching, and educator support. That's the part of the grant of the program that will support the guidance counselors and CST and teachers in the classroom, as well as parents. And so that amount will be under that second column. The rest of it will be under ESSER 3 for the learning acceleration, because students need to be ready to learn. They need to be present to learn.
Right, what I'm saying is out of the 4 million, of which 20, the ESSER 3 funds, of which 20% has to be learning acceleration, are you saying this item here that says ESS clinicians direct student support is 20% of that 4 million?
It's close to it, yes. Yeah.
So we're using all now in terms of what's defined as learning acceleration. If it's another budget, I know you mentioned guidance counselors. Would be starting point.
Well, see, the
Which
problem
grades they don't have that.
Well, the problem with the guidance counselors, and we agree, I think we all been talking about this. We agree that we need more guidance counselors at the high school level. The issue is guidance counselor, one is the guidance counselors are a continuing cost. And this is a grant for up to 2 years, and they're, saying that you really shouldn't be using it on items that are going to continue past them. These are more, short-term fixes, if you will, that are supposed to be being put in place.
So any hires that we have over here would be not terminated, but would not take us through the past 2 years of what we're laying money out for.
Yeah, this just everything has to. I forget what's the final date that it all has to be done by.
November 24th.
November 24th.
No, what I'm saying is that what John's saying about more guidance counselors,
Yeah.
which I agree with, but obviously the guidance counselor will take you years down the road, it's still paying that.
Oh, it'll be,
Yeah,
it's a long term.
I'm saying what else is on here that would be longer term?
There's none. These are all 2-year programs.
2 years,
But they will be
totally.
done by November 23rd. Yes. The other issue with guidance counselors is a large portion of a guidance counselor's job is working on scheduling with students, working on career and college readiness, all that. That is not COVID related. So that portion couldn't even be applied to this grant. This grant has to be COVID related.
Yeah, but
So the part where they may work with students who are having problems, that part could, but that's only a portion
the
of.
dynamics of the economy, the dynamics of the post-secondary school environment, colleges changed dramatically. So I feel that I would like the state, if we thought that was the right answer, I'd like the state to tell us that that's not the right answer, because to me, I get the clinicians, but talking about 2 years of clinicians, all of a sudden that would come up. So something that kids will be using,
Well, no,
just for COVID, I understand.
that's why I wanted you to listen to the ESS program first, because it's really not like the students will go into this program and stay in this program for 2 years. These are 6 to 8 week, counseling sessions over 6 to 8 weeks. If the student does not progress enough through those sessions to be able to go back, and not have the sessions, just, go back into the classroom or go to a lower level of counseling, like meeting with their guidance counselor, they will be referred up to a higher level of counseling. So it's not like it's going to stop after 2 years for any student. It's actually going to stop after 6 to 8 weeks for a student, and either they will be moved down or they'll be moved up. All right, this is
And what happens if, do these issues have to be proven to be COVID related?
excuse me?
These issues you talk about having to be COVID related, but if I'm a
Students
student.
just
but-
having issues or even stress,
No, I get it, I'm saying-
exactly, exhibiting stress over a test,
Right.
where it can be related back to COVID because they haven't been taking tests.
But they don't have to prove.
What? You don't have to prove it
You don't
now.
have to do any paperwork,
No.
say, so they can use these clinicians for
Yeah.
anything that
Yeah.
social emotion.
Yes, and any students who are having
There's no.
beyond what our staff can handle, we can refer them. There's a referral process.
I
But-
still disagree with the guidance counselor at high
Okay,
school.
good, okay, listen, let me just say that, I'm sorry. We have talked about it, and we are finding savings in the area of fixed returns, because with this program, from ESS, they will be handling that for us. We won't be having to use the money we're budgeted for fixed returns. With that and a little other savings in the budget, we think, it's possible, we're looking into providing another guidance counselor. Now, we feel that next year getting into the budget would be better, because actually providing a guidance counselor this year may be actually a little disruptive, because students they know their guidance counselor at this point, they're used to their guidance counselor. But if that's a direction we decided to go in, we do think we have the funds to do it. And then we would build a guidance counselor in for next year. Because as you know, we do have a split guidance counselor at the high school. So that would provide.
So the one would go to the one high school.
And then one would be the other. So then you'd have, instead of a half account, extra half, you'd have a whole. We were talking about it, we're just not sure whether this year would be the right time for that, because it's a ninth grade counselor, first of all, that goes back and forth. So now you have somebody that just came into the school, just getting used to their counselor for the first time, and now we have to switch a counselor on again. So it may be best to wait till next year, build it into the budget, and do it that way.
But you can look at that two ways, because we also have ninth graders that are coming in and haven't been in school for a full year that need more attention. And maybe giving them a full-time counselor would benefit them more than sharing the counselor.
You might be right, and that's something that we do think we have the money to do, so that's the direction we want to move in, and that there is a possibility to do that
Definitely is daunting.
without going to the grant
You
fund.
go to another school, and I think that the school counselor is great, I think there's limitations in terms of how much they know, in terms of non-core classes. There's a whole, every year we build the curriculum out, and someone who understands how to navigate those paths, and we hear stories from parents. There's usually the first child, the hardest one, where they say, I'm looking at this big curriculum that's, endless. And I don't know how to navigate it, so I want to take this course, but I get to that path. And it creates a lot of stress for kids. And I think that is definitely an area, and I don't know if that's the process, so what we're saying this year, in other words, there's not much value to pick up. It sounds like Jones suggested it might be to do it now, because I think the sooner the better we can. I think that's a big stress for families in general, especially when they enter high school. We're not sure what to expect.
Because a lot of kids that, haven't had somebody following them through for the last year and a half, they could have social emotional issues also. And these guidance counselors should be able to pick up on that, get them the help they need, and also guidance into the right direction on what courses they should be going to. They need help all the way around. And half a guidance counselor doesn't do them any good. That's just my personal opinion. And we've been fighting that for a couple of years now. Now more than ever, I feel they need it.
Yeah, so if we use that money to take it from it later on, in the next couple of years, we can find ways to sort of make that.
Yeah, out of our regular budget.
Right, but I mean,
That's
I'm saying, I'm for doing this as possible. So I'm saying, we use this money and said, okay, let's worry about that over the next 2 years in terms of building that position.
I don't think that it would even pass on here, and we're thinking we can get it with our regular budget. So if we really want it, I say we go through our regular budget and not have it.
Okay,
not
I'm
have it.
against that.
Yeah. Listen, we also have been saying for years that we're under, the number of guidance counselors per students that we should have in high school. I think we've all agreed to that for years. So if this is the time we want to move forward with
Yeah, and I
that.
think it's just the times, I'm
Yeah.
glad we're bringing it up. It's
Yeah.
most people, to discuss.
Yeah.
I think one of the high schools had their own department restructure, and so on. I think at the end of the day is, the end product is to find a career or a next step after secondary, after high school, right, or after secondary school. And I feel like you have all these things, I have all these courses, this, that, it's great. The problem is, like, when I walk out of class, then I'm saying, well, what do I do now? Okay, maybe I go work for somebody and learn what I want to do. Maybe I want to go to a community college. Maybe I know what I want to do at community college. Maybe I'm just going to community college, figuring out 2 years. I feel like we should be able to help the students be on a quicker path, especially nowadays since the environment is changing so much. And the way people think, you can see hiring trends are different, where the jobs are different. And I just feel like over time, maybe we should help these kids a little bit further about what they want to do, or maybe some don't want to. There's other things we talked about, the various programs that have been discussed to do that. So I think it's great. However we do it, more the better.
Process.
Yeah, because to me, if you said, okay, we didn't make too many guidance, that'd be a luxury to have, then we just.
No, we don't.
We don't have it.
We do not have too many in the high schools. I can tell you that. So, all Alright, so, let's, do we have ESS on? Let's get them on, you know, we can make this decision later.
Good evening. Are you able to hear us okay?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
So I just want to say hello. We'll do brief introductions. I know your time is limited, so we don't want to take up too much of it. My name is Nicola McCann. I'm the Regional Director for Effective School Solutions, and I've been involved with Middletown and overseeing all the Middletown programs since inception. We started in 2015. We started at High School North, and then we went over to High School South. Then we developed the dual diagnosis program, which is definitely a cost savings to the district. And now we have a middle school program that just started this school year, a full wraparound at Thorne Middle School. So today, we were meeting and working with district leadership to design and develop a comprehensive curriculum and continuum of care that really speaks to and touches on everybody. No stone left unturned. So we're going to be reaching out with the community, with parents, with teachers, administrators, and of course, lastly, with our students. So today we're just going to share with you briefly some of our ideas, some of what we thought would be helpful given the district needs, and then certainly open to questions after that. And if I'd known I was going to be on a gigantic screen, I would have gotten a makeover for this. I did not know I was going to be on a movie theater. So I apologize.
It's too late, Nicola.
It's too late.
We're here.
And this is Jerry Barone. He's our Chief Clinical Operator, the big head honcho, and he's going to also help me with this presentation.
Thank you so much for having us here today. We're very excited to give you a presentation. So Nick, I'll just kind of move through this with you. I think, our goals for today are to talk a little bit about our ESS mission, very brief on that. Nicola kind of gave you a quick executive summary about our relationship with the district, what we've done thus far. Want to give a brief introduction or continuation of a discussion about MTSS, possible work streams for this project, and the focus of the project, which is building capacity, addressing issues related to COVID and way beyond, and some of the mental health gaps that you're seeing right now, and then options and next steps, which I don't think we're going to touch on too much because number 3 is going to hit all of it. All right, quickly, ESS partners with school districts to help them implement culturally inclusive mental health and behavioral support programs that help improve care, strengthen outcomes, address trauma, and maintain students in their least restrictive environment, which is their home district. So that's who we are. That's what we've been doing since we've been in the district since 2015. And I will pass the next slide on to Nicola.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we really have made an impact. I can say that we're never bored in Middletown. We do keep busy with our students, but we provide a lot of data to support that what we're doing is having an impact, is making a difference, is actually implementing change in the way that we think. So we do share with leadership all of our data points, report cards throughout the years to kind of just support that what we're doing is making a difference. So we've seen improvements in grades, discipline, and absences. We even saw that during COVID, which was pretty unique because our grades still increased by 16%. And that is significant when the entire country was at minus 20% for grades. That's what was going as a nation. Recently, key stakeholders and leadership have shared their desire to impact an even greater number of students in the wake of the impact of COVID-19. Specific areas that we've discussed includes crisis assessment and fit to return, Tier 2 mental health services to address additional capacity that spans additional schools, grade levels, and provides additional support to the clinical teams that are focused on student solutions and critical decision-making. And then we have a robust set of professional development initiatives for teachers in the community and parents to help build capacity on mental health and trauma-informed practices, both in the home and in the classroom.
Very good. And this particular project that we're setting our eyes on is really, I heard some of the back and forth before, is really focused on more of those tier 2 students and build tier 1 building capacity for your own district staff to offset some of the increases you're seeing in mental health issues, trying to avoid students needing tier 3 interventions. And we can treat a lot of students with this model. And we'll talk more about it, as well as the fit to return. Just a quick review in terms of MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. At the tier 3 level, that's for your most chronic or acute students that are either returning from out-of-district placement or who might be potentially going out to an out-of-district placement. If we follow LRE, these are students that have tried other mental health interventions in the district, either at the tier 1 or the tier 2 level, and it has not worked. And they're really headed towards potentially an out-of-district placement, or again, students who return from an out-of-district, a very soft landing for them as they integrate back into your district. That's really the focus of tier 3 programming. At the tier 2 level, you're looking at kind of mental health kiosks, we'll call them. And for us, we're just talking about 2. One is clinical care and one is fit to return. They are separate things, but for us, we can bring that together with one clinician being able to do both of these. And we'll show you that a little bit later. But what we're talking about here is treating students with mild to moderate mental health issues that have maybe come about or have been exacerbated by the pandemic. Certainly, these are things that would be in place anyway in a school, but I think they've been further exacerbated by the pandemic. What we're looking at tier 2 level is students that can be treated in 6 to 8 weeks. Again, I'll touch on that a little bit later, as well as providing crisis assessment for students who are in a fit to return situation. At the tier 1 level, this is what I mentioned before, that you're filling out your MTSS framework and building capacity, putting knowledge and skills into the hands of teachers. I think we're going to be focusing mostly on BD classrooms, giving teachers the skills with coaching and content so students are not needing, hopefully, tier 2 services or not going into the hallways, getting disciplinary issues, or students that are ending up in counseling sessions when all of it could be maintained in the classroom. So avoidance of students seeking other alternate care. This also could offset disproportionality as well as you build capacity with your teaching staff, having increased knowledge and skills to regulate their classrooms. Again, we'll take any questions that you might have at some point or throughout this presentation. Foundational support level is really what we're kind of doing today. Mental health needs assessment, developing strategic plans, and looking at clinical consulting. Universal screenings as well as something else that we can talk about. I'll pass it to you, Nick. This is really talking about the project.
So what we discussed, we offered a couple of varying choices, and what was determined in terms of the funding and the ability, the consideration is to have, the way it's mapped out, one clinician, a tier 2 clinician that's going to do fit to returns for the high school north and high school south. They'll also do the brief clinical model treatment, 6 to 8 weeks. And then for the middle schools, the 3 middle schools would also be covered by one tier 2 clinician, and they have the ability to be flexible. They can go across into different buildings. There's not that same scrutiny level of the tier 3. And then finally at the elementary schools, which I know this is happening across many districts, the elementary schools is where they're really seeing the students react to having been home for as long as they were. And so it was identified that we would have 3 tier 2 clinicians covering all 11 of the elementary schools.
And this slide really outlines what you have in place at the tier 3 level at the top and what you're going to be adding at both the tier 2 and the tier 1 level. And this will fill out your MTSS framework and really help avoid future students from needing tier 3 services, as well as moving up and down the continuum of care. The three work streams, and Nicola, basically outlined it, that we're going to be talking about is expanded tier 2 support and crisis assessment and response, which is fit to return, right? To address issues related to COVID return, which is the uptick that you're seeing right now, but also it's something that should be in place in all districts all the time to avoid students who need tier 3 services, and for students who are at the tier 3 level to be able to move down tiers when they still need some support, but not all of that. Work stream 2 is full year professional development for parents. You cannot do this alone. The more that parents have knowledge and skills in their home, the better off it's going to be for the school district. Not everything can fall into the hands of the school. Obviously, parents who are knowledgeable about mental health issues and what they can do to help regulate their child at home, when to seek counseling services, is just an added benefit for crisis as well as maintaining their own child. Work stream 3 talks about building capacity with a trauma-attuned model. This fits right into issues we talked about before about avoiding disproportionality, as well as helping with the uptick that you're seeing with COVID issues with students. But here, it's the skills are being developed by your own teaching staff. This is going to go a long way in going into the future. So it's about content and it's about coaching when we look at work stream 3. Okay. So for to look at each of these, so we shared what the project's going to look like, and we talked about the work streams, and now we're going to kind of get into the work streams in some detail. On the tier 2 level, we talked about the clinical model. I'll just highlight the big stuff here. 12 to 15 students is a caseload, treating up to 60 students for one clinician during the course of the year. Very powerful, will address a lot of issues. And what do you get with this? You get the ESS model, which includes quality and risk management for all of these students. So nothing, we're not just going to be working with students and not look at the risk that some of these students might have as well, which comes with every model of care that ESS offers. On the far right, you have your crisis screening, response, and reentry, which is your fit to return for those students who are showing in the moment potentially a crisis. So you want evidence-based mental health assessments to be completed for students. So students are not, being sent to the ER, kind of willy-nilly. And I'm not saying that that's going on in Middletown. What we're saying is that is what you're trying to prevent, is students going when it's unneeded to an emergency room. We will be able to do the fit to return, and we will be able to do the entry conference, which is essential to offset students that might eventually need classification. So you can offset that by having a really robust re-entry and encourage parents to follow through with recommendations. Both of these go a long way in preventing students from tier 3 level of need. The next work stream we talked about is really exciting because it's about parents and what can we give parents in terms of knowledge and skills. On the far right, you have a number of different presentations that we can do. These would be virtual presentations that we can do during the course of the school year. We'd like to do 4 of these. Of course, we could do more if necessary. The 4 that I would pick out is caring for the caregiver, trauma-tuned for parents, nurtured heart approach for parents, and depression. Maybe the student is not just moody. These are all really robust presentations for parents to help them increase their knowledge regarding mental health issues with their child. And then the third tier is creating teacher champions. But this is building capacity, as we mentioned before, providing knowledge in the form of content to teaching staff, and then embedding that content by side-by-side coaching. Our thought is that this is going to be done in the ED programs to really work with teachers side by side and to coach them during the course of the school year after we've provided content, go into the classroom and really observe teachers in terms of their ability. in terms of efficacy of their practice in the classroom and the fidelity to the model of the trauma attuned, which we've spoken about. We like to include this. This kind of just gives you a glimpse of coaching for teachers. So it's an artifact slide. On the bottom, the coaching rubric has basically 4 core components to it. And that's the observation tool that we use when we're coaching teachers. One is focused on their environment, the classroom. One is focused on the materials that are being used in the classroom. The third is looking at relationships with teachers and students. Are teachers indirectly or inadvertently triggering students? And then the fourth is, how is a teacher's ability to help de-escalate students when they're struggling? We looked at all of those. If you go further to the right, you're looking at our trauma-attuned model that we use in the classroom. And above that is the actual coaching scores. So we collect aggregate scores on teachers from our observation tool, and then we measure that marking period by marking period to show, has there been an increase with fidelity to the trauma-attuned model? A really nice way to also look at that is, are students being referred less frequently for disciplinary issues? Are they being referred less frequently for classification? Is there less suspension and detentions coming out of the classes as well? We can do this anywhere in any school. And as I said before, we're looking at the BD classrooms. With that said, I guess we'll do a little thank you. It's Nicola and myself, and we can open this up for questions if you have any.
I do have a question. Suppose when you guys come in, you see more students than your clinician can handle. How will we address that? Because you can only do so many students at a time, right?
That is true.
It's basically anywhere from 12 to 15 on a caseload, and it's really subject to the number of fit to returns that are also occurring, because it's going to be playing that dual role, and what the need is specific to the building. So we really do format our services in an individualized fashion that works and makes the most sense for the particular building that we're going to be in.
And I know that the term managed care is a pejorative often, but we become our own managed care company. Essentially, as soon as we meet with students and meet with their family, we're kind of planning their discharge. Of course, we can keep students longer than 6 to 8 weeks if necessary. But our goal at the Tier 2 model is to see as many students as possible, to identify what the issues are, to address those issues, to get parents to buy into mental health and the importance of it, and then to discharge that student to someone in the community that can continue that work. Now, the truth is not every student will fit that mold, but that really is our goal, is to kind of move through these students, and but not willy-nilly. I mean, to really make sure that they're managed and taken care of. At the elementary level, we're talking about being able to work with as many as 45 students at any one time. At the middle schools, we're talking about working with as many as Nicola said, 12 to 15 students, and at the high school, as many as 12 to 15. This is in addition to the Tier 3 work that we're talking about.
And it's revolving. So, if we had one student for 6 weeks, obviously we're discharging that student and have open slots. It's very rare. I have Tier 2 in a lot of my districts that we have to have a wait list, or we're not able to service the students that are identified.
Do you have a percentage of students that you're treating from those schools? 5% at the high school, 10%, et cetera?
You mean current at present time?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Like just like an average, right?
Just an idea.
An aggregate, like an average of,
Yeah.
just an average at any given time.
I mean, I think at the Tier 3 level, it's probably, I'm guessing, probably about 5% of your student population. Those are the highest risk students that have real organic mental health struggles and really wouldn't be successful in the school day if they didn't have the support of the clinicians on site.
Yeah, we follow a model of, kind of like do no harm, right? So you do not want to admit students that are inappropriate for care, but at the same time, you want to make sure that students who need a certain level of care are provided that. So you don't want to provide a substandard level of intervention. But at the same time, we would push back and say, hey, this kid doesn't need our services if they were referred to us.
I have a question. So tier 3, I think I understand, but in tier 2, how would that work? So students in the tier 2 program, right? So not in one of our other programs, but it's tier 3 students. So would that mean they just be taken out of class during the day, or that it's out of class full? Can you explain to me how tier 3 and fifth return works in that concept? Where they're not already in tier 3 and talking about whether they're in district, out of district, or whether they're in district. So tier 2, how would that work?
Great question. And Nicola has more experience in the real time than I do. Go ahead.
And I just completely lost my train of thought because my dog is trying to get in the door because he doesn't like that I've shut him out of my office. So I apologize. Could you just repeat the question and I'll be able to answer?
What would tier 2 look like in terms of how the students would operate? They'd be in their own classroom, they'd come out, they'd be pulled out of class.
Yeah.
How does fifth return look like for tier 2? What I was saying is I think I grasp how tier 3 works, whether in district, out of district, what visions program, but in tier 2, what does that look like? For students in tier 2, in tier 2 program.
We basically work with the teachers. We don't like to pull from academics. So really we work on the electives and make sure the teachers are comfortable with us pulling during that time. And it really also is student dependent because the workload at tier 2, it's individual sessions. However, if we're in a particular school where we have 6 kids that are all sharing bereavement issues related to COVID, we could certainly make a group of that too. Again, it's working into the schedule if it makes sense for the students, and typically they would be coming during advisory or during lunch. So that we also have parent contact weekly and 2 family sessions during the duration of care. Does that clarify?
Part of it, so they're being pulled out. So what is a fit to return concept for tier 2? What does that mean? So in other words, we're still in the classrooms.
Okay, I'll explain the returns. We do them now. We do follow a crisis model that is, it works really well. And our counselors or CST will go if a student is identified as possibly crisis, they will go through a series, it's like a flow chart. And they will determine that this child is not a crisis, they can go back to the classroom. Or this child is definitely in crisis, this child has to go to the emergency room. Or, and this happens often, there's something going on here, it doesn't rise to the level of the student having to go to the emergency room, but I can't just send this child back to class now. We're going to have to send this child out, and that's what we do. We send them out to CPC, but CPC outside of school. Like they have to make an appointment, they have to go be evaluated, and then get a statement saying that they are fit to return back to school. And sometimes this could take 2 days because you can't just get appointments.
Right.
What ESS can do is in real time, if the counselor's going through this crisis, checklist and feels that the child can't go back to the classroom but doesn't need the ER, they can actually go right in school to ESS. And ESS has the clinicians that can make that determination as what does this child need. Can the child go back to class but we'll follow up with, more intensive, work with the child, or does this child really need to have to go to the emergency room? They will be doing what we used to send the child out to do. So the child will have to leave the school. They wouldn't miss that much school, if they need to go back into the classroom, whereas now they are. So that's a service that we think is going to be really valuable for us.
I guess my question, are they considered tier 3?
No. It's just in the moment. Like a student in a crisis might say something like be talking to a teacher or a counselor or something, just saying, I really feel like I'm going to do something to myself. That's a student in crisis. You have to act on it.
So it doesn't go to tier 3 services.
No, it's just a point in time.
Okay.
Now, that student may end up at some point in tier 3 based on what we find, but at that point, that student may not even be in any counseling. And usually they aren't. They're usually a student that just is in a really bad place, and then you have to find out, is this something that's persistent and that needs more attention, or what level of attention it's going to need some attention, but what level? And so instead of us having to send them out, this can be done right in the school setting, and it's easier for the student and the parent.
Thank you.
Well said, well said. You know, it's tough enough to have mental health issues for family members as well as students. But and it's a necessary evil when a student struggles. You have to have a crisis team that looks at that student and might refer them out. To have a team that's in the school that will handle that, like ESS, and ensure that the student goes to the right place if necessary, but sometimes offset that. And now your tier 2 services might be a perfect place to address some of the mental health issues that they've been struggling with. That reentry piece is key in avoiding things like disproportionality, in avoiding things like, students that are being suspended, disciplinary issues, as well as classification, because this is going to be for the gen ed population. So you're in front of it before it turns into something else. So the cost savings over time should be enormous for the district and, of course, the students and families.
And I just want to piggyback on that. Restorative practices is a really big initiative for our district this year. Rather than suspending students out, we alternatives of ways to, instead of being punitive, to be restorative. And ESS can really help with that for those students to do group work or individual work on reflection and behavior management. So I think that that's a really good, melding of our initiative and what ESS can provide in addition to helping our tier 2 students and doing the pitch returns. And in terms of the wait list, that's the question that's asked by Joan. We do have, right now without ESS, we do address students' mental health, but when it gets to that point, we have to send them out. So if we ever got to the point where ESS, there was a wait list, and we would have, the community contacts to be able to send these students out for the counseling that they need until the space opened up in ESS. We wouldn't just say, oh, we can't help you. We kind of go back to what we've been doing all along, but referring them out. And when it's in school, students are so much more likely to be able to do the counseling, especially I think at the elementary school. Parents don't have to come after school, make appointments, bring them right there in school, they get the counseling.
Is this program assessed so that in the case, as John talked about, you need another counselor, that your numbers are there, you can see that the one counselor is pretty busy. Can ESS work with us and provide the counselors, put them on the wait list and send them out?
Well, we can always ask, to have another counselor. Would be cost to that. I'm sure that we'll always be willing to give us a counselor because we'll take as many as we can. But in the meantime, there is what we're doing now, which is basically sending them out there. So we can say, the principals would know, Cornella and Patrick would know that, we're sending this student out, why we're sending this student out, why it's an ESS student. There's a wait list. And we can keep track of that to see, how we're functioning in terms of, keeping up or maybe having too many clinicians.
The reason I bring it up is because there's an accountability issue. We're trying to make sure that the money getting spent is not applied, and that's right. So you have to.
They're gonna, ESS will give us basically a contract of what they're gonna do, just like their tier 3, and that's what they do. They do what they say they're gonna do. They don't do, extra, because that's not the contract, but they don't do less. And so everything in the contract will align to what we need to align here. Basically, what they were telling us, it's all the counseling, fit returns, behavior management, working with staff, working with parents, and that all fits within. At least we're told this today. I'm going to talk to Deb, please Nicola's on that. This should fit in. It does impact students' mental health. It impacts whether their behavior, acting out, or they're just not there to learn, or just somewhere else. And there's no way that it can be connected directly to COVID. And this government is not asking us to directly. They know that there's mental health and exasperation of mental health issues. So
I was just going to, the YMCA councils having questions for this or they In other words, they would want to see it too, that's counts.
I think they have a different set of students, but I mean, that's a good question to ask.
It's different, right?
Yeah,
No touch points here at all.
I think that's a good question to ask.
That's what I was gonna ask too, how does the
We
YMCA
have,
counseling
we
tie
have,
into this?
the YMCA, they're in our schools, and they do counseling for students that are recommended to them. Would there be any, like, integration of that, or would, like, they do their students and ESS do their students, or how would that work?
I work in a district where there's also a teen center, and there's a different company that provides that general support to the students, and it works really beautifully. We work in partnership with them. So if a student is identified that they have more concerns in terms of treatment, ours is a little bit more formalized and standardized, especially because of the parent involvement. Typically at that level, the YMCA is doing, I don't know how much parent involvement is included, because I think it's just the students. Is that correct? I might be wrong when I'm saying that.
That's correct.
It's correct. Okay.
I'm just wondering, when you said, if it's, for the fit to return, if a student needs to see a counselor, like we send them to CPC, what about the YMCA counseling? Would we be referring them to them, or that's a whole different type of?
That's a whole different, yeah, the CPC that did the fit to returns, they were on mid-35, that's what they did. They would see a student that we sent, said the student's in crisis. We know that they're not ready to go back to the classroom. Please evaluate them and let us know what does this child need to go to the emergency room? Can the child come back to school? And that's pretty much all they would do, is just say, you get a note from them saying, we've evaluated the student and the student is just returned back to school. So that's totally different than the YMCA. YMCA actually meets with students and counsels them during the school day.
So, but ESS process here, and I understand the evaluation, but also have counseling services for the student, right? Is it just evaluation or?
Oh, no.
It's counseling.
It's 6 to 8 weeks of,
Right, okay, that's what I thought.
you know,
Clinical evaluation but also counseling.
clinical counseling, yes.
Right, so how would we
There's
decide-
two separate things.
Right.
We need both, you know.
No, I'm
Yeah,
sure we
so-
know, I'm just wondering, if
Yeah.
I'm a child that might be in crisis or student in crisis,
Yeah.
how does it determine which way I'm going in terms of why sort of setup or like?
No. If a student is in crisis at that moment and has to, go, somebody says, we think the student is in crisis at this moment. They go to one of our counselors or CST or whatever, and they get the crisis evaluation done. And from that point, just that moment in time, that person is either sent back to the classroom, sent to the emergency, or sent for what we call fit to return. That is totally separate from the counseling part. Yeah, now, through this fit to return process, this kid that was in crisis one day, it could be identified that maybe this child is good for tier 2 intervention and could be referred to the tier 2 system of intervention, but maybe not. Maybe this child is, just to go back to the question, maybe it was a moment in time, a breakup with the girl, that's all they're just lashing out, or maybe it's something really serious that they end up, in the hospital for a few days or something like that. So that is just almost like an evaluation of someone in crisis, right? And what happens after that, it depends on what the clinician that is evaluating and determines has to happen.
So it sounds like the direction wouldn't go from clinician to why, but could it go from the YMCA to the clinicians? In other words, could the YMCA be doing counseling and identify someone who potentially could be in crisis? Or is that how? I'm just wondering how all these different things out there.
That
how they
happens all the
relate to
time. That
how they
happens all
do.
the time, like a counselor is counseling them or
Okay.
the wise counselor, and a kid learns something out in counseling, and you dug deeper in and found out this kid may be suicidal. Well, that kid is in crisis at that, but they say something like that, last night I tried to kill myself or something like that. That stuff does come out in crisis. In counseling, and then you would go to the fit to return and find out, well, is just this counseling we're doing okay? Or we have to,
Okay. So it's a process where folks, students are in YMCA counseling, there's some sort of touch point, there's okay processes.
Yes,
So
yeah.
to get
But I see like the Y counseling and the ESS counseling is two kind of concurrent, the counseling portions going on. Some kids will go into the Y counseling, some students will go into the ESS counseling. You're not gonna be both at the same time.
I was wondering, please, determination.
So I think it's important, please correct me if I'm wrong, Nicolette, but ESS level of care is a little bit higher than YMCA stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, when they do the intake for ESS program, they may determine that they're not appropriate for tier 2 in ESS, and they might recommend some YMCA.
Okay.
So it's really 2 levels
Yes.
of care.
Okay, two levels.
Yeah, I got
Sounds like
Thank you.
great.
That's perfect. Yes.
My only question would be, getting back to the point I heard about a wait list. Is there staffing issues and how long would a wait list be? Child that need that assistance.
But that's, we don't really know right now. We know how many fit to returns we had last year. We had that 80, which was about 2 weeks.
1920 was 84 fit returns. Obviously, last year was a little less because of
Yeah,
the situation.
the year before, yes.
Is that just a high school or whole student population?
That's the whole student population.
Yeah.
And then we had 23 psychiatric evaluations that year, and then 31 trips to the hospital also.
Yeah, out of those, 30 corrections. So, but, if we're just gonna have to monitor and to see, do we need another clinician or do we just continue? And that'll be something we'll bring to the board, we think we need to go with another clinician because
Waiting
we're
list
not.
be the list and you want to get rid of a
Yeah.
child that needs help.
But we wouldn't just put somebody on a wait list.
Yeah.
We would find them help. We would connect them with some community organization or counseling organization to get them help. We're not just gonna say, oh, you gotta wait another 8 weeks. That's not option.
Yeah, I mean,
No.
the way that I see it is obviously we have an obligation to do that. And we would never just say to somebody, well, our thing is full. I mean, I think the other thing to think about too, about that number with the 31 trips to the emergency room. What's interesting to me though, is the expansion of this program, the way I see it, is in some scenarios where, yes, there is a child in crisis, but it doesn't really meet the level of having to go to the ER because one of the, I don't want to say the bad thing, but one of the downsides, obviously, of taking a child to the ER who may not need all of a sudden that level of services, is they're put in a situation where they then have a 72-hour hold, and you can't get that child out. And so that in and of itself caused even more trauma to that child. And so with these services set in place, this is sort of that in between, where they're, I think, better, equipped to make that assessment where there's something going on and we need to obviously address it, but we don't need to subject a child to going to the emergency room right now.
And that's one of our
So
approaches
that's,
that
yeah,
we don't send, we don't like sending.
and that's huge.
And often we were finding that we'd send them out to the pitch return, and they would just send them to the emergency. We're like, we didn't even think that they should go to the emergency room, you know what I mean? So to avoid that, it's really important.
Yeah, it's a much more powerful way. And some of the data points that we would be collecting over the course of the year is how many students needed to be sent to a fit return, how many of those actually went to the emergency room, of those students that returned from the emergency room, how many were connected to services either at the tier 2 level or something else, how many of those students ended up in tier 3 care. These are all valuable pieces for the district to look at. And of course, at the capacity building level, tier 1, if we're doing what we need to be doing, you're hoping that there's going to be less students needing to go for, fit to returns eventually, because you're creating these well-regulated classrooms where students are feeling as if they can be regulated during a school day. So all of this kind of fits in together, and all of those pieces are part of an overall MTSS framework for students. All of this fits together. At the tier 2 level, data points would be how many students did you see for the year? How many of those students ended up in tier 3? Did any of those students end up going from tier 2 to needing a fit to return? So these are all valuable things to say whether this is going in the right direction or not, and things that we will put together in a quarterly report and share with the district on a regular basis.
I know from our tier 3, programs we have, they do provide us with a lot of data and information. And they work really closely with administration so that administration focuses on exactly what's not working. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much for tuning in tonight.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
Thank you. Have a wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks,
Take care.
everybody. Appreciate your
Bye-bye.
time. Good night.
feel an agreement we had with the,
I have a question on the evidence-based summer learning. Why does esports fit into there? And why not have a social skills program? Well, because we used to have social skills during the summer. I'm not against esports.
Yeah,
It's great,
esports
but
kids, they don't just play games. They actually do graphic design, they do coding, they do, I mean, it is a learning experience for
it
them.
just sounds to me like that's something that should be coming out of our budget, not the master fund. And that's something more like
I think
social
we funded
skills.
it through the funds last year too, right? Yeah, last summer we did it too. So what you're saying is you would like to see some kind of social.
I would like to see a social.
Because that's for special needs, right?
For special needs and actually anybody else who needs it. I think now more of these, our high school and middle school students could use some social skills.
Yeah.
They've been out of touch for a while. And, you listen to parents and, some of the complaints that they have, and it really is a socialization thing. So, we had a great social skills program years back, and we were supposed to learn it and take it over, but that never really took place. And I think that, to me, that's more important.
We can look into that, see if that in. I mean, that could probably fit in under that's great, no problem. But we'll
Why
look
and
into.
the other question is, why instrumental music camps? I'm not against it, because I'm all for that, but we're just targeting music. What about the other arts? We're just heading toward one art and not the rest. Is there a reason for that?
We can look into that
I'd
too.
like to understand that.
We know that these are two programs we ran last year, and they were so successful. The kids loved it. Part of it is to build up the music program, because the music program has been kind of waning a little bit. Our arts program has not. That's been doing well. So I know that was one of the reasons we did it last year, but the students were like, it was both the esports and we got the highest.
But if you want a well-rounded student, why are we sticking at just one particular program? We should be offering all of them.
Well, part of it, so I believe last year it was for like fifth graders going into middle school, could join. And then the eighth graders going into ninth grade, so that they become familiar with the bands. It was like to get them, to joining the marching band at high school and taking band class at middle school. Get them, they might have been students who never even took an instrument and took this, and then now they're in the band program. So I think that was the idea behind it. I mean, all the students do take part in, as a special or, as an elective. Take it in the middle of high school or, the elective. So I thought the thought was to get students into areas where they may not have went to kind of, if they had some interest in it, to move them into it, where there's opportunities during the school year for students who are interested in art, more so than instruments. Because like all students are exposed to art at the elementary, but only few are exposed to the instruments.
Sounds to me like that's something we should be working on during the school year. During and not just the summer. I mean, we've known our music in some schools has dropped dramatically. We should be working on ways during the year to get our elementary kids involved in that. Like some of the schools, they do invite the eighth graders up to the high school to play in the marching bands and stuff.
Yeah, well,
And that's good, but I just don't feel comfortable targeting one thing. There's students in the summer that might benefit from taking art or dance or whatever.
Not ruling it out, I'm just saying, I'm explaining to you why it was in there, but, we can look at your suggestions and see if we, I don't know how much these are gonna cost. I mean, some of these buckets aren't that big. There's only 52,000, 45,000, 52,000, the 763 has to do with basically professional development and support of staff so that they can support the students. So these would not fit in, social skills and adding art. So, but, you know, maybe we could get them under accelerated learning, so we'll have to do a little investigation, see how much it will cost, you know, cost it out.
I think we did have the art class, I think, that we because of the physical education requirements in elementary. Aren't they only asking art?
Is art,
Art was one of the classes because we had to have extended time for physical education, that block. It kind of messed up some of the art was one of the ones in that.
Spanish was, I know.
Yeah, so I think.
Whatever,
We have also
I mean,
art academy, so
yeah.
it would be nice to have other sort of, you know, for music is great, the program, people did the program summer, loved it. But that'd be a great idea to sort of encourage art, I think that some of the other kids can do. Because we do have other things that work.
We'll look into it, we'll see, you know, costs and, you know, if somehow we fit it under the grant, yeah, that's not a problem. I mean, more things we can do for our kids. So that,
I just think we have to prioritize what we think is the most important here.
Also, I think when you look at these two programs that you have there, the e-sports, which I'm not against e-sports, I'm not against the music program, but I think it's targeting, you're trying to do the whole district. You're not getting the whole district, like you're targeting certain grade levels that are gonna come to. What about the other kids? Where nothing in the arts, if you're doing arts, you have arts for all levels. Yes, you do have music for all levels, you're not gonna get all levels to come. You have a chance of all different grade levels of students to come to the arts. And you only have 52,000. It's not like we have a lot of money.
I know, that's what I'm saying. That's
So
what
maybe
we have to see
one
how we
thing-
fit that in here. That's what, we have to work up the costs and then see how we can fit it in.
No, but maybe one thing instead of, this is not gonna work. I don't think these programs are gonna work.
Okay, these two that are there will work. We worked it up, you know, that we
Right, but it's gonna target only one group of kids.
but as I said, we're gonna look at it, okay? We have the workshop, come back, you know, discuss it again, right? This is due on the 24th, I believe, so you'll be approving it at the voting meeting, so we'll see what we can do, and nothing's ruled out, okay? Okay. And the other thing that I do want to bring to your attention is the school health coordinator, which would be for about 6 months. Because I know it was tabled, the job description, just want to make sure that that's okay. Especially because now, and Charlene can attest to the hours of work it takes because of the teacher testing. It is like to support the teachers and provide them with all the information and answer their questions and do the, you know, all the things we have to do just operationally is a full-time job. And it is, it's something that, you know, it's, I don't know, if anybody can tell me there's gonna be an end to it, that would be great.
So, speaking of that bucket, the ESS clinician, what's the price tag? So,
Or basis, I guess.
was that?
I don't think it's a flash date. I think,
Well, yeah, how much do you think of that 4 million? I mean, I'm fine with that.
I'm curious question about the money.
Was that?
It's over 2 years.
Yes.
The money, so that was my next question is, what if you undercompensate with that money?
For everything or just?
Just ESSER three.
Just the ESSER three.
Okay,
Okay, well, the ESSER three, the bulk of it, well, 20%, this is Kim, she's listening and she's emailing me and telling, I mean, she's texting me, telling me why I'll get back to that in a minute. We're trying to do 3.2 for, you know, the 80% for the HVAC systems. Trying to keep that there for that. That's all we can put to that. Then the other 20%, which is about 800,000, will be, you know, ESS and the clinician, and maybe we can push in, you know, like something else. But I don't think we're gonna go over this. We always have HVAC projects, and we're gonna know exactly what the ESS program is. You know, that's a set.
Say, for ESS, you shouldn't be going over because that's under contract, so you're gonna know what that's.
Yes, I would say, we're gonna know exactly what ESS is, You know, the other 80%, we know what that is, we know we can spend 20 times that and more.
Is that gonna be a flat fee or it's gonna be a per?
No, it's usually a flat fee.
It's a
contract.
flat year, it's a flat fee per year, so it'll be prorated this year once they get started, and then it'll be a flat fee the following.
So you think that's gonna be $700,000?
It's gonna be over $1,000.
Over $1 million, oh,
I just want to point out too that
Some will go into ESSER 3, and some of it will be under the coaching, that the second column. Because the
Okay.
part that goes for working with teachers and parents will be under that. And
okay,
then
so the two buckets are gonna be.
the two buckets will
Oh.
cover the ESS.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, I just wanted to point out too, is all of the items and all the initiatives that are being discussed here. There's only gonna be a certain amount that we can fund with the grant money, but that doesn't mean that they can't be run, you know, through the budget or through other funds.
Yes.
So it's just a matter of saying, well, this is what we're gonna apply the grant funds to. These, you know, the other initiatives that may not be covered by grant funds, doesn't mean that we can't do them and they couldn't be built into a budget or something like that.
So that's getting on the long term. Then that way.
Well, or temporarily, I mean, just because you budget something doesn't mean you have to budget it forever. I mean, if you have a temporary need next year for certain programs, you can certainly build that into the next year's budget. And
Just getting back to exactly the school health coordinator, we're saying 6 months, we're gonna hire somebody, fire somebody.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
The school health coordinator, we're gonna hire somebody, fire somebody.
It's gonna be, it's not firing, their job will end on June 30th, that's what it will say. They're being hired for a specific period of time to, you know, fill a specific role. If you looked at the job description specifically says for this year only.
And what is that exact, what is it exact detail of the coordinator?
We have the job description on the last agenda, so I don't have to see tonight, I can bring it. But it's basically to coordinate the teacher testing, support teachers, answer questions, do the operational part, and also work on the student and a lot of what Matt's doing right now instead of his regular job would be, you know, supporting the nurses and the parents and the administrators with students that are positive or contacts, dealing with the health department, all that work that just was added.
So do we have a number that we allocated for this?
It's about 40, we're gonna put about $45,000 into it. We don't know, you know, there's the whole thing is about, I think it's about $75,000, but that's prorated. So it depends on when we get this person hired and how many months they will be going. So we estimated about $75,000 cost for the year, but because this is only gonna be for 5 or 6 months, it's gonna be bad for a little bit more. So.
the other thing we should keep in mind too is, as you mentioned before, this grant period goes through September 2024. This is now, you know, November of 2021. We may find that our needs will change and evolve over the course of this grant and discuss, you know, making changes in this is a plan. It's a plan that we submit and the budget gets approved. But if as a district, we see that the needs are changing and or something else is needed more than something else, the district does have the ability to pivot as long as it's an allowed cost of the grant. So to try to project out for 3 years is tough.
Yeah.
Who are we sending this to get approved?
The county office of the NJU.
Yeah, but ultimately, they have to follow the guidance that
Right.
for the state for the first 4 and for the federal government, I don't even know, it might actually go to the federal government for that extra.
And are they the ones that are doing the seminar on Thursday with Dr. Richens to tell school districts the best way to spend this money? Because I saw that flyer on Twitter and I copied it.
They're always doing stuff like
Because
that.
I'm saying, we're here sitting here deciding what's best for our district, and then we're gonna go to a seminar and hear him tell us how to spend the money that they're giving us? That to me,
They're probably-
These workshops really target just helping districts determine what would be an allowable cost.
Yeah, the allowed, like, you know, what would be in evidence-based comprehensive beyond.
like this, that's my point, we're sitting here planning this, and he's gonna tell you, go over at a seminar, what these funds should be spent for, and
We've
March
already-
don't fall under this category.
We've already been
that work, we have already attended online workshops, there's been guidance, and we've had conversations directly with the county office on plans.
And I'll get back to the school health coordinator, we had it on the agenda list, we can now put it into the ESSER funds.
It was on the ESSER funds, and we had it on the agenda for voting, but we took it off because we tabled the ESSER vote. But you were gonna vote on these funds at the last board meeting, and because you didn't, and that was part of the funds, it was suggested, it was a good suggestion, to also table the health coordinator, because it's part of the funds, you want to be able to.
So we're looking at approximately 45,000 for the school health coordinator, about $1 million for ESS, and the balance for the EDC.
Well, no, some of that million for the ESS is also gonna go under the column 2, the accelerated learning coaching. The part that's professional development, and parent training, that will go under there. So they're gonna break the bill up into, this will be, professional development, parent training. This will be basically student interaction. The biggest part obviously is student interaction. So that is, gonna be under the ESSER 3 part. Total bills and be more bill.
What did you say the estimate for the HVAC projects would be in there?
Well, that would be about 3.2. That's the highest allowable that we can use for facilities in this, which is 3.2.
Right, I mean, obviously the district has projects that,
Go way beyond.
greatly exceed, I mean, the intent was to take funds available from this grant and combine them with other funds to start moving some projects along.
So,
Which one of these columns have a line item budget?
Well,
this is all separate. This is all grant money.
they're different, there's different, in the application, you have tabs for each sub-grant and then the ESSER 3. And then there's, the line items are just related to whether you're budgeting for staffing or whether you're budgeting for professional services, whether you're budgeting for other equipment purchases, and that's the line items right now. But again, you can even do amendments on those, like I was saying before, over the course of the 3-year grant period, and if the district decides that they want to reallocate some of these funds, then that's allowable too, as long as it's under certain percentages and approved by the
I guess my question is, you have 763,000 in column 2.
Well, that's, right, that's set in stone, that is our allocation.
Okay, so you have that allocation, but now in April of next year, we say, how much is left of that? Would you know?
Okay.
Yes, right, when we submit, these are reimbursement type grants, so when we submit our expenses to get reimbursed, to draw down on the funds, we'll have to submit them to each category and each budget line.
And I just do want to stress what Amy said, and that was really, I should have said that this is what we want to use the grant for. This isn't everything we're doing that we want to do in the future, that we want to do in our summer programs or next year. But this is what we feel that, we want to do with this grant. So even if we can't fit something into this grant line, we may be able to fit it into our budget also. But we will look at the things that that you requested.
Right, it's similar to how we use other grant funds, we use them in a lot of cases to partially fund initiatives, and then we'll pick up the balance in our local budget.
And Kim was saying, and she's right, the reason that we picked instrumental music at camp, so these were really hit hard with COVID when we were either virtual or the cohort model. They aren't designated classes, so they really weren't regularly happening. Whereas even if it's only half year, it was actually happening, even if it was virtually or cohort model. When you have just supplemental, only students take them if when they can, if they signed up for them. Those are the things that kind of fell more to the wayside, so those students didn't get the opportunity to participate in them. But that being said, we will look at the more advanced social skills.
Could you just explain to me the $45,000 under mental health support staffing grant, what is that going to do?
This is the restorative practices that we were talking about. And this is so after school, instead of someone, there's a fight, someone would normally get suspended for maybe 4 days. They won't get suspended. They'll have to stay after school, but instead of having to clean windows or something, which is punitive, they will be involved in restorative practice. It's like counseling, you know what I mean? So this is for staff to run those after-school programs.
Ms. Fenix, that would be a stipend position.
Yes.
All 3 middle schools would have one, and the high schools would have one as well. It would be posted, and it would have to be a school counselor, some sort of school counselor would run it.
I just think it's a good thing to explain it so everybody understands exactly what it is.
Yeah, this is really.
That was actually the next question, what consists of stipend and what consists of the new hire?
No, it would be one of our current.
No, I'm saying what consists of a stipend and what will consist of the new hire on here?
I think the only hires is
I'm
what
looking
was the.
It would just be the school health coordinator would be the only,
So there will be stipends throughout, everything else existing staff.
everything else is,
They
if
only pay
it,
stipends to existing staff.
yes. Except for coaches. You can
Well,
pay coaches outside.
Athletic, yeah, that's what I understand.
But everything here is going to be either ESS, existing staff, except for the school health coordinator. That's-
Yes, I'll make a motion to close the public session and we need to go into closed session for matters of contracts. No, our public comment was the beginning on our special meetings.
But I'm saying ask questions about the presentation.
No, not now. Public comment was in the beginning. I need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Like,
Opposed? Abstention?